Hello there, it's Sarah from Paper Lovely. Thanks for joining me today. I'm back with part 2 of my 10 cards 1 kit using the Simon Says Stamp August 2019 card kit. If you missed the first 5 cards, you can check those out in the video that I posted yesterday. But here I've gone ahead and jumped right into card number 6. So I've trimmed out a panel from this streamer pattern paper to 4x5 1/4 and attached that to the top of my card base. I had some leftover of that green checkered pattern paper from yesterday's cards. It measures about 1.5 to 2 inches, and I went ahead and placed that across the bottom there. I'm going to stamp out a sentiment here on some scrap Nina cardstock, and I went with Party Like a Panda because birthdays only happen once a year. I've also got a scrap piece of some MFT After Midnight cardstock, and that measures just slightly over 1/4 inch. I'm going to place that along the bottom here just to ground the panda that I'm going to sit on top of that. So there, I peeled away the backing to that Scor-Tape, and I'm going to go ahead and place down my blue stripe. And then I popped up my sentiment with some foam tape. There you can see I had cut that at an angle. I'm going to place that down here off to the side. I've colored in my panda and my balloons, and I'm going to go ahead and glue the panda down directly on the front of the card base. Just going to sit him down there on that blue line. And then for my balloons, I wanted it to look like the bear was holding them. So I'm going to go ahead and first use a little bit of our glitter glue to just tack down those very edges and make sure I keep those in the spot that I want them in. And then I wanted to add a little bit of dimension to the balloon, so I'm just snipping off a few small pieces of some foam tape here. I'm going to slide those underneath. And then I'll peel away the backing and press each of those in place. I will again go ahead and just run a little bit of white gel pen over those highlights just to make them stand out a little bit more. And then I wanted a little something next to that sentiment. It was just a little bit too much blank space for me, so I've grabbed some leftover gold sequins. This is from the last Spellbinders kit that I got, and I'll just place those down with some glue dots. For the inside, I'm stamping out the sentiment Happy Birthday using my VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And then I trimmed off another stripe of that After Midnight navy blue cardstock. And I'm just going to place that along the side for a little bit of an accent. I'll add some ATG to the back and go ahead and place my panel on the inside. And that will complete card number 6. So for card number 7, I'm going to create a long card. I wanted to create the idea of a panda bear floating in the air with some balloons, and I wanted to have sort of a longer area to work with to create that idea. So I've taken a full piece of After Midnight cardstock and scored that down the middle at 4 1/4, and then I went ahead and trimmed that down to 8 1/2. I'm also trimming down some scrap cardstock. This is Paper Tray Ink Tropical Teal, and I'm going to just trim off some 1/4 inch strips here to create a little bit of a background pattern before I place down my panel. I'm adding some 1/8 inch Scor-Tape behind each of these. And then I've laid these out in a pattern. I'll go ahead and peel away the backing and get those all placed down. I'm trimming out a front panel here that measures 3 3/4 by 8 inches. And I'm going to add some ATG and place that down on top of my card base. Off to the side there, you can see I've already got my images colored in with my Copics. And now I'm going to get everything laid out. So first I'll add down my balloons, and I'm just going to place those right on top of my panel with some art glitter glue. And I'm keeping this top and bottom balloon sort of peeking off the edge of that panel to again give the idea that he's up in the sky and sort of floating around. And then I wanted to try to make him really look like he was floating. So I've grabbed 2 mini wobblers, and I'm going to place one behind the balloons and one behind the panda. And I don't want to attach these two because if I leave them separate, then I'm going to get a lot more wobble than if I were to glue the balloons onto his hand. So I'm being really careful as I place everything down to make sure that it lines up the way that I want it to. And you can move these around quite a bit without them sticking, as long as you have a really light touch. And then once I have it in place where I want it, I'll go ahead and press him down. And then I'll do the same thing here with my balloons. So if I'd been thinking ahead, I really should have stamped my sentiments before I placed everything down, but I decided after I had him in position that I did want to add a few sentiments here. So at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and stamp out "It's Your Birthday." I'm using my Versamark Onyx Black ink, or Versafine Onyx Black ink. And then up at the top, I'm going to add that "Oh my gosh" sentiment. And it worked out pretty okay to have the magnet go ahead and hold down the wobblers. It really didn't get in my way too much when I was stamping it all. I wanted to add a little bit more floating in this sky, so I'm going to add in some confetti or some stars, but I felt like I wanted a little bit more black. Again, I felt like the black in the pandas was just kind of heavy, so I wanted to add a little bit more to sort of spread that around the card base. So I'm just going to position these using some of the large stars, some of the small stars. Then finally, I've grabbed some Studio Kasha clear crystal fusion sequins, and I'm going to place a few of these around as well. They have a really nice sort of blue, green, purple sort of tint to them, and that worked out well with the blue background and also for the idea of him floating in the sky. So I've again got another panel trimmed to the same size. This is 3 3/4 by 8 inches, and I'm going to stamp out my inside sentiment. And I went with "Party Like a Panda" because birthdays only happen once a year, and then added underneath that "Let's Celebrate." I had an extra strip of that tropical teal left over, so I'm going to place that along the bottom here. And then I'm going to add a few more stars on the inside. This was my favorite card of the bunch. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I'll add some ATG here to the back of my panel and go ahead and place that on the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 7. So here for card number 8, I'm keeping things really simple. I had some leftover of this rainbow pattern paper from the card I made yesterday, and I've just trimmed that down and I'm going to place that here on the top of my card base. When I trimmed it, it just made sure that I had a color on either end instead of white. And then I've grabbed some scrap black licorice cardstock. I'm going to stamp out the sentiment "Happy Birthday," and I'm using my Versamark ink for that, and then I'll go ahead and heat set that with some Simon Says Stamp Fine Detail White Embossing Powder. I'm going to go ahead and stamp my inside panel. I'm again on a Nina panel trimmed to 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm stamping out the sentiment, "You're allowed to cause as much pandemonium as you'd like." I grabbed some scrap Hawaiian Shores cardstock. This is from Paper Tray Ink, and it was the closest I could find to match that blue stripe in that rainbow pattern paper. And I'm going to stamp out the sentiment, "Let's Celebrate." Gone ahead and trimmed down both of my sentiments, and I'm going to add some foam tape to the back of both of these. I'm going to go ahead and place this down, and I'm just centering that right along the line where my pattern paper meets my cardstock. Then I'm going to add just one line of some thin 1/8 of an inch foam tape to the bottom portion of that "Let's Celebrate" sentiment. Going to peel away the backing, and then I'm going to place that down so the top of that is just overlapping the "Happy Birthday" sentiment. That way everything is nice and even. I've got one of my cutout pandas here, and I've colored in this gift with my Copics, added some foam tape behind that. I'm just going to position that so that it's covering that piece of cake, so this way he looks like he's carrying the present instead of the cake. And then I'll add some art glitter glue to the back of him and place him down on the front of the card base. I've trimmed off another piece of that Hawaiian Shores cardstock, again about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm adding some 1/8 inch Scor-Tape behind there. I'll peel away the backing, and I'm going to place that along the bottom of my inside panel. And then I decided to add a few of these stars on the inside. So for this, I'm using Lawn Fawn Mermaid ink. I really love those stars. I kept coming back to them again and again. I'll add some ATG to the back of that panel and place that on the inside of my card base. Finally, at this point, I realized that they had included this sparkle pen and I hadn't used it on anything. So I went ahead and added just a little bit of shimmer to the bow on the present. And that will complete card number 8. So I'm doing something a little different here for card number 9. I kept wanting like a bamboo image to go along with the panda bears, and I don't have any, bamboo stamps or anything like that. So I decided I would sort of create or mimic the look of bamboo with a paper straw. So I've taken my fingertip knife and I'm just trimming this in 1-inch segments, and then I'm going to cut each of these in half. That way I can get some dimension, but it's not going to be, crazy tall. And I think if I were to do this again, my edges are not terribly smooth from when I use that fingertip knife. So I might take this to my trimmer and see if I can get a straighter edge and run it through that way. But it worked for what I wanted to try and do here. So I've got a Nina panel trimmed to 4x5 1/4, and I'm laying out my stamps here. And if you saw there, I had actually decided to create a line of the bamboo going along the bottom. So as I positioned my stamps, I just placed 2 pieces of the straw that I'm going to use so that I knew where I wanted to place everything. And I am stamping this out using my VersaFine Onyx Black ink because I forgot that I wanted to color with my Copics. So I did end up pulling in my Prismacolors to color in the little extras on this bear. And the reason I didn't risk it with my Copics is that if you use Copics with this ink, if you go over the ink, the marker will actually pick that up and it will stain the tip of your marker. So you do want to be really careful which inks you use with your Copics. Since I had everything out here, I'm stamping my inside panel, which reads, "I'm so sorry, let's celebrate." So now I've got my bear colored in, and I'm going to add a stripe of some 1/2-inch Scor-Tape across my panel here. And then I'm just going to take each of these little pieces of the straw and I will just line them up as best as I can. What I ended up doing here, since I had some edges that weren't perfectly even, I figured bamboo doesn't grow perfectly even. So for the bottom edge, I tried to keep that as flush and lined up as I could. And then the top edge, I just let that fall however it ended up falling. I've trimmed off a 1/4-inch piece of that Hawaiian Shores cardstock, and I'm just going to place that along the bottom. And I am also using a card base made from the same Hawaiian Shores cardstock as well. I wanted to pull it in a little bit more orange since I had used that on his hat on the front. So I'm using some Lawn Fawn fake tan here to stamp out the confetti. And I'll add some ATG to the back of my panel and then place that on the inside of my card base. And that will complete card number 9. For card number 10, I'm going to create a shaker, and I have gone ahead and trimmed out this frame. It's the smaller frame that comes in the Blueprints 32 set from MFT. I use this set for interactive cards all the time. So I've trimmed that out and I'm adding some Scor-Tape here, and I'm just going to peel away one edge at a time, and I'm going to attach this to a piece of acetate, which I've trimmed out, and I trimmed the backing card as well as the acetate to the exact size of this frame. So it was 2.5 inches wide and 3.25 inches long. So there you see, I'm going to pull away each edge of the Scor-Tape and then place down the acetate as I go. Next, I'm going to create my well for my sequins to sit in. So I'm using some 1/8 inch Scor-Tape, and I'm just running one layer of that around all 4 sides. I'm going to stamp my sentiment onto my back panel, and I decided to go with Party Time. I'm going to go ahead and get my shaker put together now here. So I peel away the backing on my foam tape along the bottom and about halfway up the sides. I'm going to go ahead and place that down, and then once I've got that aligned, I'll pull away the backing from the sides, and then I'm leaving the backing on that top piece. So that way I can sort of squeeze this just very gently, and I can get my sequins in place there. I'm using some leftover sequins from a recent Simon Says stamp card kit, and I'm not sure, I can't remember which one it was, but it was a really pretty sort of sunshine gold and yellow. And then I have some leftover star sequins, and these were from a very old paper pumpkin kit that I got. So I've just put in what I had left of each of those and then peeled away the backing on that top piece of foam tape and pressed that in place. I've added some art glitter glue to the back of my panel there, and I'm going to add my shaker window to the front of my card. And then I want to go ahead and pop up my panda as well. So I wanted him to be just a little bit taller than my shaker window. So I'm going to do 2 layers of foam tape on him. But I'm going to add a single layer here, and then I will add just another small layer for my double to keep everything nice and even. And I'll go ahead and put him in place. For the inside panel, I am stamping out the sentiment, "It's your birthday, hip hip hooray." And then I grabbed that same red pattern paper. It's very hard to see, it's subtle, but it does have sort of a red polka dot to it that I used on the frame on the front, and I've trimmed off 2 about 1/4 inch pieces of that, added some Scor-Tape behind, and I'm going to place these on the bottom of this panel. I've trimmed off the excess. I'm going to add some ATG to the back of that panel, and I'll place that on the inside of my card base. Oh, and this card base is made from MFT's pineapple cardstock. Finally, I wanted to give that panda bear a birthday hat again, so I've done some quick Copic coloring on that, added a foam dot behind it, and I'm going to place that just up top above his head. And that will complete card number 10. Here are a few close-ups of the finished cards. In the description box below, you'll find my blog post, which has additional photos and links to the supplies I used. If you enjoyed the video, please leave me a comment or a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.